Nancy Guthrie disappeared without a public suspect. In Tucson, Arizona, after 124 days, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos is still pointing to labs, DNA, surveillance, and digital evidence. But no arrest has been announced. That matters because this investigation may no longer be about finding one clue. It may be about proving what happened if Nancy Guthrie is never found. And there is a second problem hiding underneath that one. Whether the searches that did not happen could become as important in court as the evidence that did. The public version of this case is not complete. If you want the next verified development in this case, follow the evidence with us. Nancy Guthrie vanished from her home in Tucson, Arizona. More than 4 months later, there is no named suspect, no public vehicle confirmation, no announced DNA hit, and no confirmed recovery of remains. That does not mean the case is inactive. It means the visible investigation has narrowed into evidence most people never see: lab work, communications data, video analysis, purchase records, surveillance review, and possibly investigative genetic genealogy. Sheriff Chris Nanos has described investigators as working inside rules of court and guardrails. That phrase matters. It signals a case being built not just for an arrest, but for what may eventually survive in court. There was a hair found in Nancy Guthrie's house. The source material identifies it as rootless hair. That is significant because rootless hair can be harder to process for DNA, and specialist labs may be needed. There were also early searches, dogs, a search plane, initial activity around the home. Then the public search picture changed. No large grid search has been confirmed publicly. No broad desert operation has been described. And that absence has become one of the central questions of this case. Because in a possible nobody homicide investigation, not finding a body is not the end of the problem. It is where the legal problem begins. The first visible complication came through 2 raids. South of Tucson and Rio Rico, near the border with Mexico, investigators executed a federal search warrant. A man named Carlos was detained, then later let go. The source material describes him as a delivery driver with no confirmed public connection to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. That detail matters because Sheriff Chris Nanos also said DNA can lead to a suspect, but it can also exonerate the innocent. In this case, that statement sits beside the memory of people pulled into the investigation who, based on the available information, do not appear to have been connected. Then came the second raid, only a couple of miles from Nancy Guthrie's house. The FBI and federal agents were involved. The house was searched through the night. Lawyers later became involved for the people connected to that location. Still, no public arrest followed. So the case tightened again. From Tucson, Arizona, the map shifts to labs, data systems, and forensic timelines. Investigators are reportedly relying on multiple labs, labs plural. That could fit the rootless hair. It could also fit investigative genetic genealogy, which can require more than one specialized process and more than one analytical step. But the question is not only whether DNA exists. The question is whether it points to someone who should not have been inside that house. And if it does, whether prosecutors can prove how it got there. There is also a video. A Google Nest or Nest camera captured the covered person on the porch. The image has become one of the public anchors of the case. Someone may know the posture. Someone may recognize the build. Someone may know the clothing combination. But recognition is not evidence by itself. The camera does not tell the whole story. It only tells investigators where to start looking for the parts they cannot yet see. For a moment, the case looks like a familiar modern investigation. There is a video, there is DNA, there are digital records, there are federal agents, there are labs, there are rules of court and guardrails. That sounds like forward motion. Then the nobody homicide expert's warning changes the frame. If investigators do not conduct thorough searches, they may not only miss the opportunity to find Nancy Guthrie, they may also leave open defense arguments later, that she walked away, that something else happened, that the search was never complete enough to rule alternatives out. The missing search does not just affect the family, it can affect the courtroom. And that means the absence itself becomes evidence of. Do you think the limited public search activity around Nancy Guthrie supports a careful evidence strategy or leaves prosecutors exposed later? If the next filing changes the search question, you will want the full context. Nobody homicide cases carry two separate burdens. First, prosecutors must show the person is deceased, not simply missing. Second, they must show the person in the defendant's chair is responsible. That is why remains matter. Even partial remains can answer timing, location, and condition questions. They can clarify whether the person was moved. They can help separate natural medical events from criminal conduct. They can reduce uncertainty. Without that, prosecutors rely on circumstantial architecture, camera records, DNA, communications, search history, movement evidence, witness statements, purchase records, behavior before and after. Each piece matters, but each piece also has limits. The possible federal hook is kidnapping. The source material explains it as detaining someone against their will, even briefly. If Nancy Guthrie was removed from the house, that could explain why the FBI and federal prosecutors would be involved behind the scenes. That does not mean charges have been filed. It means investigators may be preserving a federal pathway if the evidence supports it. Step back from the porch for a moment. Think about the defense question, not the search question. If a body were found a quarter of a mile away, the legal story could look different from a body found 10 miles away, or inside someone's house, or never found at all. Location is not just geography, it is legal meaning. That is why a thorough search can become a shield at trial. It allows prosecutors to say they tested the alternatives and eliminated them. Now place that beside the United Cajun Navy. The group reportedly offered search assistance. It described potential drone specialists, canine dog specialists, manned aircraft, and a partnership with a group out of Mexico called the Topos Estes. The source material says the sheriff's office did not accept outside volunteer help at that time. That is not proof of error, but it is a documented pressure point, because the United Cajun Navy said it could have initial personnel on the ground within 72 hours and a wider effort within a week. It also described the terrain around Tucson, Arizona as difficult: heat, desert, cactus, and conditions that can limit canine work. The hidden issue is not whether volunteers should control a search. They should not. The issue is whether an official command structure could have used those resources without compromising evidence. Here is the dip-catch detail most people miss. The search question matters even if a search finds nothing. Nothing can still be evidentiary. If investigators can show they searched within a 2-mile radius and found no trace, that absence narrows the story. If they cannot show it, the gap remains open. And open gaps are where trials become dangerous. By now, the case appears to be waiting on science. The rootless hair goes to labs. DNA work continues. Investigative genetic genealogy may take time. Video enhancement may continue. The Google Nest or Nest camera metadata may still hold details not obvious in the image. That is the clean version: slow, technical, careful. Then the communication evidence enters. Unverified reports suggested Nancy Guthrie texted someone immediately after a family dinner, and that the person was not at the table. Those same reports claimed investigators recovered the wider communication history around that message, including metadata and prior contact patterns. If verified, that would not be just a text. It would be a timeline marker. Because the most important part may not be what Nancy Guthrie wrote. It may be when she wrote it and who already knew. The text claim must be handled carefully. The content has not been made public. Verification remains pending on the full communication history, any alleged deletion records, and whether the message fell outside Nancy Guthrie's normal pattern of contact with that recipient. But if investigators have the metadata, the phone can still tell a story: a timestamp, a recipient identifier, a delivery record, a read status, a sequence of activity before and after. Metadata does not explain emotion, it fixes time. That is why communications can become powerful in a case where the physical trail is thin. If Nancy Guthrie contacted someone immediately after a specific event, investigators can compare that timing to interviews, phone records, surveillance, and later statements. Another claim detail requires the same caution. Unverified reports suggested Nancy Guthrie had raised concerns in the weeks before she disappeared. The source material also mentioned a voicemail on a Friday evening, a lawyer appointment, and the claim that she lived in that house for 52 years, watching the Catalina Mountains through decades of Arizona mornings. Those details are not publicly proven here. But they show why investigators would care about communications before the disappearance, not only after it. Back inside the evidence path, digital records widen the case. There may be thousands of videos, business cameras, neighborhood cameras, traffic cameras, ring cameras, school cameras, gas station cameras, license plate readers, vehicle data, Bluetooth connections, navigation history, door openings, ignition cycles, phone pairing records. Modern movement leaves fragments, but fragments are not the same as proof. Investigators still have to authenticate each record, preserve chain of custody, connect it legally, and avoid building a false theory around a vehicle that had nothing to do with Nancy Guthrie. Purchase records add another layer. The source material raised the possibility of major retailer records, including Walmart, connected to items such as a backpack, gun holster, gloves, tape, a burner phone, a flashlight, clothing, and a mask. Those are investigative possibilities, not established facts. But if several items were purchased together at the right time in the right area, the pattern could matter. One receipt may be noise. A cluster can become behavior. Then there is communication avoidance. A burner phone, no phone, a phone left elsewhere, a two-way radio. Each possibility changes what investigators can subpoena and what they can never recover from a cellular provider. Why would that matter? Because if the person on the porch avoided ordinary phone traces, investigators may have to prove planning through other records, purchases, cameras, vehicle movement, and digital absence. Absence again, it keeps returning. Now reorient the case before the final turn. This is not only a missing person investigation, it is not only a forensic case, it is also a future courtroom problem being built one admissible step at a time. At approximately the 75% mark, the reward becomes more than public pressure. The reward has reportedly grown to $1.2 million. The $1 million reward remains unclaimed. The FBI tip line remains 1-800-CALL-FBI. That should create movement. But nobody homicide experts often see breaks come from something else. A person with information who later needs leverage in their own situation. That is the uncomfortable possibility. Someone may know the person on the porch. Someone may know about a vehicle. Someone may remember unusual behavior, missing clothing, scratches, stress, money pressure, or an obsession with the case. Those are not accusations. They are the kinds of details investigators test. And if someone has withheld information, the passage of time may not protect them. It may only give investigators more records to compare against what they eventually say. The final legal picture is narrower than the public debate. If Nancy Guthrie is found, the evidence can answer questions the data cannot. If she is not found, prosecutors may still pursue a nobody homicide case, but they must prove death, responsibility, and the collapse of reasonable alternatives. That is why the searches matter. That is why the labs matter. That is why the Google Nest or Nest camera matters. That is why the rootless hair matters. That is why the text, if verified, matters. The implication is plain. In the Nancy Guthrie case, the strongest evidence may not be one dramatic discovery. It may be the convergence of small records that finally leave only one explanation standing. If this case matters to you, the next verified development deserves close attention. Whether the unresolved Nancy Guthrie search gap becomes a courtroom vulnerability and how that compares with other nobody homicide cases built without remains is the question the public record has not yet answered.